How do you create a villain that is not only interesting and layered, but feels like it is baked right into the mythology of your world? And how do you create a villain who is even more terrifying than the classics, like the Lich, or the Aboleth, or the Mind Flayer? Let me introduce you to one of our most undervalued D&D monsters. Hello adventurers, and welcome back to the Red Quills. My name is Ryan, and this is day 3 of the Red Quills Mapvember Challenge. And today I am creating the Gates of Night. Now, as we've gone through this month so far, of which we're only day 3, so about 10% of the way there, I've been creating maps that are a part of the world of Red Quill, and as I go through, I'll continue to do so. Every day I'll come out with a new map and a new video, and you'll be able to find them on the Red Quills Patreon, updates on my social media, and of course you can always take a look at the Red Quills Discord for what's going on as well. And today is the first edition that's going to be much more in the vein of the Really Quick Maps series. I'm creating a lair specifically for a monster. The Gates of Night is our prompt today, and I'm using them as the base for a Death Knight. So before we talk about the Death Knight and its strengths and exactly what I'm putting in this lair, I'm going to talk about the context of the lair itself. So when I created Requield as the basis for this map making challenge so that everyone can contribute to it, I wrote a creation mythology. And it's really quite a simple mythology. It is that there were 2 creators long ago, 2 brothers, and they made the world, and it was exhausting, and they didn't have a great time of it. And when they had finished, one brother turned to the other and said, "Hey, I can't believe you convinced me to do this. I'm very angry that I have sunk all this time and effort into something I'm not really happy with." The other brother turned around and said, "Wait, this was your idea." And they fought, and then one pulled the heart out of the chest of the other, and then that one died and fell to earth. All of which is, pretty par for the course for a D&D mythology, as I'm sure you know. But when you're dealing with a creator god on that sort of scale, death is much less permanent than it is for ours. I talked a little bit more about it in yesterday's video of Tanaloon. But basically, one day that creator will rise again. And when they do, it's going to be apocalyptic for this world. We're not going to really deal with that when I'm creating these maps. It's just that that's the sort of boundary that we've got. We have a history of creation and we have a prophecy of end. And between those 2 boundaries, we as world builders in this collaborative challenge can do whatever we want. But I thought that that was a very fun thing to work with. So at the end of the days, when the creator rises again, it's going to end the world as we know it. So why not set up a villain whose sole task is to stop that from happening? There are many different kinds of undead in Dungeons & Dragons and in any TTRPG, but they all have different flavors. And although the Lich gets a lot of attention as being perhaps the most powerful and irritating of all of the undead, I feel like its reputation is a little bit overinflated. There are others as well who are just as worthy of attention, like the Mummy, or even the Death Knight, and they all have their different specialities. While the Lich is the flavor of wizard that achieves undeath through its own means, the Death Knight was the closest thing we have to a paladin, one that rises up and has magic powers, yes, and is bound to the world through eldritch powers, but is also a knight, a martial force that can meet your players in battle head on and is unafraid of blood and toil. And I think that that gives us a great deal to work with. Now, despite the fact that the Death Knight has perhaps one of the dorkiest illustrations in the entirety of the Monster Manual for 5e, there is a lot to be said about its powers. First things first, we need to understand that it has limitations, of course, that it is an undead and it has all the benefits and drawbacks therein. It is also a spell sword, which means that it's neither particularly good at sword nor is it particularly good at spell, but it does have the functionality between the 2. So what the first thing we need to do when looking at this stat block in order to make it challenging for your players is understand that what he needs is tactics and minions and a base that plays to his strengths. His strengths, of course, being the fact that he has dark vision to 120 feet and it is immune to the conditions of being exhausted, frightened, and poisoned. He's also immune to necrotic and poison damage, which means that if we flood this lair with poisonous gas, he is not going to be harmed by it. Which means that if we heat this lair to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, he's not going to be bothered about it because he can't be exhausted. Because if we remove all the oxygen from the air, he's not going to need to breathe it. So when we think about creating a base that plays to his strengths and to our party's weaknesses, we need to approach it from that perspective. So when we talk about the Gates of Night and it having this undead guardian, we need to make it into an area that is going to be beneficial for it and hostile to the players. Because we ask ourselves, at what point was it beneficial for this character to become a Death Knight? Long ago, Saul Vane was the greatest knight on life in the lands of Anakos. He served the creator gods as a roving champion, dealing out justice and laws for the common people of the land, and one day found out that the creators don't actually care about the mortals that roam about the surface of the world, that the wars of gods and monsters and man are nothing but an evolving entertainment for them, that all of his loss and gain throughout his life doesn't mean a single thing on the scale of the creatures that can make an entire world. So how does the greatest knight on life react to such a discovery? Well, he commits himself through powers unimaginable to mortal mind to stopping the creator from ever rising again, to extending the life of the mortal plane by any means necessary. So that is Saul Vane, the Death Knight who inhabits the Gates of Night. And the Gates of Night themselves is the prophesized place where one creator, Bustan, will figure out how to raise his brother. If Saul Vane can manage to cut that area off from all creatures, magical or mundane, and protect it, he can extend the life of the world, perhaps indefinitely. And so that's what we're setting up here. This is the area in which the end of the world will eventually occur, and Saul Vane is the knight who's trying to stop that at all costs. Now, how do you make him into a villain? There's a lot of ways to do that, and what I'm going to do today is just set up the scenario rather than a whole quest, because as we go through, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add more and more different sites and enemies and lore to the world, and then towards the end, I'm going to create like a whole quest line that we can do that explains why you have to come up against people like Saul Vane, even though he has motivations which, strictly speaking, I kind of agree with, but still make him into a villain that you can face. But I feel that having these motivations, these dark paladin urges, these oaths of devotion or love, are the dark side of what it means to be a champion, a paladin. And I feel that they are motivations that are very, very interesting for a Death Knight to have. Take what makes a paladin and push it too far. Which brings us to the map itself. Now, I've gone through, as you can see, and I've sketched out what the main complex looks like. What we're thinking of here is a large Gothic castle that's perched on several mesas atop a blackened wasteland. At the center of the large circular wasteland, a crater in the surface of the world, is a crystal, a collection of crystals that are purple and black and glow faintly in the moonlight. Around them, the air crackles with magic and the ground is a wasteland, for no living thing can come so close to such a maelstrom of magic as spouts from them. And so we have an area which is hostile to all life, which allows us to create an environment in which it is beneficial to be a Death Knight and not beneficial to be a mortal creature. The Gothic castle, of course, just allows us to add a little bit of context to it to show how long he's been here, but also allows us to give him minions. So we're going to start, of course, in the causeway that leads to the castle. We're going to call it the Weeping Cause. The Weeping Cause is a semi-broken bridge. It's been here for hundreds of years that leads from the edge of the crater into the towering monolith of the castle itself. And it's a hostile environment. So what's going to happen is as the players continue on, we're going to make them aware that this is an environment that doesn't like them, in which they will need to be aware of every step. So they're going to have to start making constitution saves against the environment itself, against the heat or the magic in the air. The bridge is going to collapse under them, which is a mechanical trap, which will require a dex save. And of course, any undead in the area that have picked up their approach will start to climb the sides of the bridge and come at them from underneath to try to pull them off and throw them to the ground below. So this combat is much less about the exact undead that they're facing, which could be ghouls or wights or even just standard zombies, and is much more about the fact that the environment is hostile and they need to be aware of it. We can even start to bring in the lair actions of the Death Knight here and have him aware of everything that happens within the confines of the crater that surrounds the Gates of Night. Because after that, we move on to the Chapel of the Vow. What I wanted to do is give Saul Vane the feeling of having contributed greatly to a semi-religious order that follows him, that believes in what he has set out to do. And so we've got a chapel where they worship him, but they also steel themselves and are initiated into the Order of the Knights of Vane. And so the chapel itself is cursed, so there can be no healing magic past this point. Which again, very fun, very cool. The undead do not need to be healed. They cannot be healed. Saul Vane can't heal himself. And so I think it's very fun to level that playing field as well. We're always talking about spells like, protection from good and evil, or the paladin senses as showing us what is, consecrated or what is desecrated. In this particular case, it has been desecrated in the eyes of the creator. And so that means that the benefits of those good powers, the ability to heal, greater restoration, are not spells that will function here. It has, offshoots of the buildings. I'm going to add in a couple of, more mundane enemies like wights. And I've talked about wights in a previous video if you want to check them out. They are very, very fun as a solo boss. But in terms of higher level, and the Death Knight is a CR 17 enemy, we want something a little bit more powerful than simple zombies here. And we've got artifacts as well. So what I was thinking, if you don't really want to hamstring your players into not being able to heal, then there's an artifact that has been desecrated. It is the source of their worship, and if you destroy it, you can't heal again, and that's a way to get around that as well. It's a bit of a puzzle solving option. Once we move past the chapel, we get onto the chain bridge, and it's similar to the first bridge in which you have a great deal of distance between you and the ground floor, but I'm thinking like the old image of cages on chains hanging over an abyss, a scaffolding above, allowing them to swing gently in the breeze, with only a light creaking and the cawing of whatever crows and ravens and vultures have found their meals in whatever lives in the cage. And those cages are enchanted so that his enemies can be put within them. Anyone who has come in the past to Saul Vane's castle and has failed is put into the cages. And the cages are enchanted so that once they die, they rise again, bound to his service as, zombies or ghouls, again, or wights, whatever you want to make them. They are a flavor of undead that should be adapted to the level of your party. And that is less important than, of course, the image of what happens. And as you go across, we've got an evolving puzzle here. As you go further and further and further, you wake up more and more of them, and it gives them the sense of dread and alerts them to the fact that his power is also in the fact that he has a great deal of minions and the ability to compel people to do his will, because the Death Knight's compelled duel is going to be something that comes up in the next room. So I've got two separate rooms here. I'm going to talk about the next room, which is the Ashen Vigil, because it's number 5 on the list. We've got 6 areas here. So I'm going to talk about number 5 and then I'm going to go back to number 4 just because that's the way the castle is laid out. So the Ashen Vigil is like his throne room. We've got a lot of history here. This is their opportunity to learn the lore, but this is also the opportunity for them to get their first taste. Every boss battle has 2 parts, and this is the easier part. So you'll come in and you'll see the long black carpet that leads to the basalt throne of Saul Vane, the desecrated knight, the one who guards the end of the world. So they'll come to Saul Vane and they will try to fight him. And what he's going to do is this whole area is set up for the practices of the Knights of Vane. So if once a good portion of the party moves into specific areas past the columns, a wall of force will separate them from what happens in the main aisle. So he'll use that to split the party so that only one of them can fight him at a time. And then he'll use compelled duel against them. Right? And that, again, not only brings us back to what his powers are and what his modus operandi is, but also into what they can expect as his tactics later on, and give us a little bit more of an understanding about him as a character. This whole place is just exploring the lore as well as giving the players a challenge. So let's say he's defeated one of the duel, and he looks down at their broken body. Perhaps they are still clinging to life. And he says, I feel not in the mood for death today, little one. Flee now, and I will grant you your life. Face me at the gates of night as a man, and you shall meet your doom. And so then he leaves. He goes to the gates of night to wait for the final option. And the players have the option of going straight to the gates of night, or leaving, or exploring more of the castle. Because then we go to area 4, which is the Oathbreaker Queath. So the idea is that this was something that Saul Vane built himself. He's been here for centuries, just amusing himself by building a Gothic castle. That's fine. And he created this area before the Knights of Vane were a thing. And since then, they have expanded it as being their sort of training grounds, somewhere that they train themselves, somewhere that they hone their skills and focus their attentions. But also, once they die and they have fulfilled their function in the Knights of Vane, they come here to be laid to rest. So we have 3 wings of 3 different difficulties of undead. So we have the knights, who are a martial threat. We have the priests, who are, a magical threat. And then we have Vane's family, who were killed by a wrathful god, which again gives us more context, but allows your players to have a little bit more of a strategic advantage. So if your players go there first, they will wake the undead and they can fight the undead there. If they go straight to fight Saul Vane, then he will raise them. And we've got waves of enemies that can come in, each with their own tactics, because the gate of night, which is the last area, is a large windswept plain in which the very air parches the mouth. After every minute, the players must make a con save, and if they fail, take a point of exhaustion. This is a ticking time bomb, and I want to make this clear, this is not a challenge for low-level players. If we're dealing with players that are like, level 18 or level 19, that's not nearly so bad as dealing with a player that's level 5, because this will obliterate them. But, when you're dealing with higher-level players, then that's fine. And if they destroyed the relic in the chapel early on, then they will be able to use healing magic as well. We don't want to, hamstring them too much. This is just to give you guys the structure of what a challenge can look like for them. Overall, there are a lot of different tactics that you can use for the Death Knight. This is really just talking about the lair itself. There is much more that you can do in terms of precisely what enemies can come across them, but I wanted to take this time to talk about the lair and the mapping that we've got going on. So what did you think about the new style? And for tomorrow, the next prompt that we've got for tomorrow, if you want to create your own and compare it to mine, is I'm going to create a dragon's spire. I was going to do an ancient amethyst dragon's lair, like a vertical spire with different caverns in it, all of which showcase the dragon's power. I'm going to call it Corriman's Spire. So tomorrow I'll be back with the video about that, and we can go from there. All right, everyone, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this peek into Saul Vane and the Gates of Night, and I will see you tomorrow for day 4 of this map making challenge. See you then.